now to a frightening incident on the campaign trail today, and a man has thrown missiles at Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. The incident happened in Barnsley, where Mr Farage was campaigning ahead of the general election. A man ran away before police officers tackled him to the ground. There's footage on your screens now. You can see that man there picking up lumps of rock, it looks like, from a building site bin, chucking them at Nigel Farage's Reform Party battle bus. He's running away there, then you can see, and the police apprehend him further down the road. And this comes after a woman was charged with assault by beating and criminal damage when a milkshake was thrown over Mr Farage in Clacton-on-Sea last week. And let's speak now to our Homeland Security editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. So, 2019, Mr Farage was milkshaked in Newcastle, milkshaked again last week. Now, the ante has been upped. Projectiles have been thrown. Mark, we seem to have an escalating problem with political violence. Tell us more about this incident.
Yeah, there's some real concern about the potential for this escalating even further in the weeks leading up to the general election, because politicians are at their most vulnerable. They are out and about in constituencies right across the country, determined to try to meet members of the public, of the electorate, to try to get the message across, as Nigel Farage was doing today on top of that battle bus in Barnsley town centre, when someone just by the side of the road where there was a construction site threw a number of objects at the bus and towards Nigel Farage. He ducked and managed to avoid those objects. Now, it's clear that one of the objects was a cup. Don't know what it was containing. There was some wet concrete apparently thrown. But Nigel Farage also believes that there may have been a stone or harder rock that was thrown towards the bus as well. That is now being investigated by South Yorkshire Police, who detained a 28-year-old man on suspicion of a public order offence. He is now in police custody and being questioned. After this incident unfolded, just a few minutes later, Nigel Farage, from the safety of the lower deck, laughed it off, but it was clear that he was very frustrated about what is becoming now a regular occurrence of him being targeted out and about on the campaign trail.
I'll tell you what I'm worried about.
Let me just make sure it's the right one.
If you think about this, a week after we commemorate D-Day, which was done so that we could live in a democracy, where we can agree to disagree, we can be very passionate, but agree to disagree. What we've now got is a mob that want to close down all debate. A mob that are prepared to use violence to achieve their goals. And that, for a democratic country, is very, very worrying indeed.
Are you okay?
Me? Yeah. I'm used to it. I don't like it. Of course not. Because this is stopping me doing what I want to do. You know, I'm at my best going out, meeting people and talking to them, having debate with them. You know, going around the pubs or whatever I do. And these violent youngsters are stopping me. It's very, very frustrating.
It didn't hit you this time?
Didn't hit me this time, but yeah, I mean, you do wonder to what length these people will go.
And that is, I think, one of the real concerns that Nigel Farage and other politicians have about the potential for this to escalate into more serious violence. We've seen in both Germany and Slovakia in recent weeks politicians targeted and being seriously injured in those countries. So some real concern. And in fact, the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, has issued a brief statement this afternoon about this incident, in which he says there must be no place for violence and intimidation in our politics, and these actions should be condemned by everyone. He goes on then to thank South Yorkshire Police for their prompt response in arresting this suspect. And I think the fact that the Home Secretary has felt it necessary to comment really indicates just how concerned politicians are about the potential during this election campaign for there to be incidents where politicians are being targeted, not by those who disagree just with the stance that a particular politician has on an issue. We've always had a proud history of political disagreement, but those who are willing to cross over from verbal disagreements into what is political violence.
Mark White, do you think something more sinister is happening here? We seem to have a media class, Prevent, the counter-terror organisation, seem obsessed with the far right, but certainly since October the 7th, Mark, it seems to be more of a radicalised left-wing movement, certainly since the Palestine protests took to the streets in Britain. We've seen an arson attack on Mike Freer's office. He stepped down from politics, Conservative MP. Of course, David Amos was murdered in October 2021. We saw Parliament just around the corner from here surrounded, and that impacted an actual vote going on side. We've seen constituency officers of parliamentarians from the Labour Party surrounded by those from the hard left, the pro-Palestinian support. Is this something you think we need to talk about? We need to have an open conversation, because if it's getting too dangerous for politicians to campaign during a live electoral cycle, Mark White, that is not a healthy democracy.
No, and we've always had issues with the left, or indeed the far left. I remember covering many May Day protests when, you know, that was activists and far left groups that were involved in some really serious violence against the police and against businesses that they saw as offending their particular sensibilities. So yes, there's always been issues from those on the left and those on the right. But I think it's less about that and more about those who can't just anymore, it seems, accept that you can disagree with an individual. You can argue your points with an individual and then agree to disagree and leave it just at the political rhetoric. There is now a movement on both sides, it has to be said, where people want to really just enact that disagreement out in much more physical terms. And that can, as we've seen in Germany and as we've seen in Slovakia, result in really significant and serious incidents. And of course, in this country, you mentioned, of course, David Amos, but we remember Joe Cox as well. So there is just a real concern that from whatever side of the political spectrum this may come from, that as we get into an increasingly heated political campaign, that there may be those individuals who are willing to cross this line.